Thanks, Jason, and MP, thanks very much for making it out here. I know that Jasper and team have been trying to get you here for a few years, so we're really thrilled and privileged to have you here.
Pleasure is mine.
Today.
Thank you.
So, MP, when I came to India, which was 1995, there were 3 sports channels. ESPN had one, Star had one, and DD had one. Now there are 24 at last count, including HD. You have 11. But with your recent acquisition of 10 sports, people are saying it's essentially a duopoly. What does that mean from a sustainability point for Indian sports?
Just, you're right, there are 24 channels and 2 major players now. We have 11 of those 24, but our journey with sports started way back in '98 when we did our first one-off cricket game. Those days we used to have just a couple of channels, and it was on a Hindi general entertainment channel. Sony Entertainment Television is the name of that channel. Since then, we've come a long way with the acquisition of 10 sports. We today have 11 channels and a very strong presence in the sports broadcast and a digital market. With 2 major players, I think there is a leveling that is happening in the market. There is maturity of the market, in the market, and you will see that more economics-led rational decision will get taken when it comes to sports broadcast in the market, which has not been the case in the past, but early signs are there, and you will see more of that happening. In a mature market, it is very important that we keep the focus on the customer, the consumer of a content, and the ability of that consumer to pay for the content that he or she wants to consume on any screen.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, you talk about economically rational decisions, and we'll come back to that in one particular context in a little while, but India's always been cricket and the rest. There wasn't a lot of the rest for much of the past sort of 15 years or so, but since the IPL launched, there's been a proliferation of leagues, I think at least a dozen. Many are still around, some are not. The broadcasters are critical to the success of these leagues, but how does the economic work for everyone else but cricket? I mean, you see in 2 cases, the broadcast is a principle, not just a platform. What about the rest of these leagues? What's their sustainability without not just broadcast distribution, but financial contribution?
You ask a very important question. We have seen a proliferation of leagues of multiple sports in India. I think the trigger really was back in 2007, 2008, when IPL came in. And after the first season itself, it became such a huge success. That encouraged a lot of other sports to look at possibility of local leagues in India. And we saw many of them come up, and we've seen a very high rate of attrition. It's very important that whatever we do has a mass appeal. As I said earlier, consumer has to be in focus. You have to come up with a league for a sport which enjoys a mass appeal or has the ability to engage the masses going forward. And there have been examples of such leagues in the market which have been successful. Pro Wrestling League that we've done 2 seasons of is one such. Wrestling is part of Indian culture and not very popular sport on television, but with pro wrestling, we've taken it out there and made it successful. Pro Kabaddi League is another example I can give you. Kabaddi is a sport which is played in rural India more than in urban India, but it's been part of the culture in India for a long period of time. So bringing it out and making it a sport which engages viewers across the country has made it so successful. So that mass appeal is extremely important, but also what is important is the overall structure of the league. And do it for you believe in it. You believe it's going to be a strong, sustainable business, and not because your ego is telling you that you must also own a league. Yeah. So for economic sustainability is extremely important. Funding of the league is very important. How you structure the revenues for the team owners of a league is extremely important, because that will attract the right kind of people to the league, which will help develop and grow the league into the future. So it's mass appeal coupled with strong structure, which is both organizational and financial, which will lead to more success in the league formats.
So you say mass appeal, and I think that's something that's been consistent with you over the years when we've met and talked, and football falls into that genre, kabaddi, wrestling, which I know you're a big fan of. But does that mean that some of the so-called niche sports, tennis for example, or golf, etc., have no place in the league genres? Do you think because the tennis leagues came and went, I know there was a golf league that came and went, is there no structure that works for those?
We at Sony believe in a multi-sport culture. We've all grown up with cricket. Cricket comes easy, we understand the sport, we know our heroes, and we've also tasted success with cricket over the last several years, at least 2 decades. Therefore, cricket comes easy, but reality is that India is a very young country. The youth today is following sports other than cricket as well. And many of them actually are following sport other than cricket, which is football, UFC, NBA, etc., and some more. So it's first important for us to make those sports accessible to the youth across all platforms, make them really popular with them by engaging them with those sports, giving them opportunities to interact with the sport, as well as the sports persons that are involved with that sport, take it closer to them through programs at the school level, college level. That engagement will build affinity to the sport, and therefore acceptability of leagues, because that affinity will also build talent in the country. You won't find too many good footballers even today, and find me a good basketball player, you'll find it difficult, right? So once the youth starts to engage more actively with these sports, they start participating in it, they step out of their comfort zone and actually be part of that sport through participation, active participation, you will see the sport growing, affinity to the sport growing, and therefore possibility of leagues becoming successful for these sports. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. We have to work on it, and something that we at Sony are doing with some of our partners, whether it is NBA or it is La Liga or WWE for that matter. Our objective is to get the viewers to engage and participate with the sport rather than just be passive viewers of the sport.
So I've always been a proponent from my IMG days of sport working top down, and in order to develop grassroots and to develop stars out of grassroots, you need heroes. And as you said, India has suffered from a lack of non-cricket heroes historically, but that's changing. I mean, we talked about badminton now. You've got 3 Indians, 2 women also, which we'll come to women's sport in a minute, who are doing exceptionally well, and Srikanth. So that seems to have some of the ingredients that would augur well for both commercial and operational success. So is that something you'd support?
I do. Badminton is a very good example. But in the recent past, we've also had heroes coming out of wrestling and boxing as well. We have to, badminton as a sport is something we've all played in our school days, college days, and even now whenever there's an opportunity, we try and play it. And therefore, it can be considered to be aspirational for the parents to push their kids into badminton, because The courts are accessible. It's not a very expensive sport to play. You have top quality coaches that are available in India who can train train the kids. But when it comes to boxing or wrestling or any kind of contact sport, that's where inhibitions start to come in, because parents don't want their kids to go out and get beaten up. It's a mindset issue. It has to evolve into a sporting culture where acceptability of multiple sports becomes a part of normal routine rather than being forced into it by anyone.
But I think we are seeing more parents being open to the idea of children pursuing a career in sport because that they can actually have a financial career in that game. IPL has made professional cricket more accessible to more Indian players. You know, we're talking about, whilst kabaddi is a mass sport, it's aspirational for someone who lives in a village to be able to make 40 lakhs a year, which is maybe $60,000, $70,000, which is unheard of money for them from the villages. So some of these mass sports can be aspirational for the rural families as well.
Yeah.
And I think kabaddi's done that by positioning these players in a contemporary way and giving them careers.
I think IPL has played a key role in opening up windows to alternate careers in sports for the youth today. Parents are allowing them to participate in sports. There was, and there is still a lot of focus on education. That's not going away in a hurry in India, and it should stay as well. But at the same time, for a more rounded development, earlier parents used to send their kids to play some sport or the other, but now these are also being seen as possible career choices, career options. And that's a very good sign, started by IPL, and I keep going back to IPL because that was the first pioneering initiative and has become hugely successful. Seeing the number of heroes that have emerged from IPL, the number of stars who play for India in the international games, who started their careers with IPL, has actually made people think about possibilities that their kids may have if they participate in sports. Yes, cricket if possible, but other sports as well now becoming popular with heroes emerging from the masses.
So let's just move a minute to the business of sport. I mean, I think, you know, when people come to these sessions, especially when you look at places like India, and, you know, I think I've always said to Jasper, we seem to be a poor cousin to China at these conferences in many ways. But I think there's a real reason for the people in this room to look at India. What does India need, besides everything, from all the professionals in this room? Where's the opportunity? What would you like to see being migrated across to help us develop more rapidly?
The easy answer on this would be India needs infrastructure. Yeah, but I know that easier said than done. But keeping that aside for a moment, and having discussed the leagues and sports becoming part of culture, I think we need more professionalism in management of sports in India. And there have been people like IMG who came several years ago into India and contributed a lot, but reality is they were the only ones who actually came and stayed, right? And in the early, mid-90s, cricket was the only sport that was played in India, and therefore opportunities were very, very limited. Now with multiple sports coming into India, being played in India, sports management becomes very important for the overall growth of sports in India. And when I speak of sports management, I mean, if I take leagues as an example, the entire structuring of the league, the organizational structuring and the financial structuring, plus how the league will be run on a day-to-day basis, the criterion for selection of team owners, so that you get team owners who are serious about the league and being part of it, and not just come in for a year because they think that they need to be there for reasons other than business economics. Apart from sports management, I think there have been a lot of technological developments for sports broadcast across the globe. And if we have access to those technologies. We at Sony, as we speak, are setting up a world-class sports studio, which will be operational end of this month, once again with the help of IMG. And we are replicating what they have in Stockley Park in London with AR, VR, top-of-the-line equipment and facilities. More of that needs to come to India to upscale the quality of production on our television and on our digital. The other thing which is very important is development of skills in India. Our industry is about 25 years old. Our television industry is 25 years old in India. But one of the key things that we suffer from is lack of trained, skilled talent. More so on sports, because sports broadcast is relatively new to private sports broadcast is relatively new, and therefore we've not really had too much good quality talent coming from within India. So if we can get that support from the outside, where experts can come in and train the talent for us and basically create experts for the future, that will be of immense help.
So skill development
Yeah.
in technical areas specifically, or across the board?
Across the board. Across the board.
You know, one of my experiences in this over the years, and having been on the other side trying to sell production and other things, is the willingness of stakeholders to invest behind that. And that seems to be changing. So I guess that's the message. You're building a world-class studio with the help of world-class people.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I think. And that happening now, I think, again, is an opportunity for people around the world to come in. I mean, I always say that there's opportunity both as principal and provider, and especially to sell shovels in a gold rush. There are 12 leagues. There's going to be another 3 or 4 launched. They may take a while to be financially successful, but they need production, they need event management, they need signage, they need everything.
Absolutely.
And so all the people from those different areas and others in the room should see India as an opportunity. And I think that the Indian principals are more willing to look at partnerships in the spirit of partnership. And there's evidence of that happening, on a regular basis. In terms of outbound, MRF just announced sponsoring three EPL teams. Apollo sponsors 1 EPL team. TCS sponsor the New York Marathon, and have now taken the Mumbai Marathon after that announcement, actually. What do you see as potential for export from sponsors and from maybe even some of the indigenous sports, etc.? Do you think there's an opportunity to take India out?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that we've seen that in cricket. Indian entrepreneurs, businessmen have gone and invested in cricket leagues in West Indies and in South Africa. That's the latest. So that is already beginning to take shape, and more of it will happen. There is an aspiration for the big Indian businesses to become the Indian MNCs.
Yep.
And therefore they are making investments not just in advertising their brand, but actually going out and being part of that universe through active investments in some of these leagues that I spoke about. Outside of sports, there have been many investments, but in sports, we have now recently started to see a huge growth in activity on investments. It's still limited to a few corporate houses. When they taste success, I'm sure others will follow suit as well. So you will see more of India out there.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, yeah.
Yeah.
So, coming back to that earlier point, my old boss, Andrew Wildblood, used to say the profit's in the buying. on that basis, what are your views on the numbers that were garnered for the recent IPL rights? What are your views on those across the board, not just the media, but the sponsorship and the various tender contracts they had?
Yeah, what we have to be very cognizant about is that there is a finite level of flexibility in the market. The market can't absorb all the inflation on the rights cost. If you keep IPL out of the equation, because that's very, very unique, for the other sports, it is very difficult to find sponsors on a sustained basis. So every year, in every outing, we have to go out and pitch again. When it comes to IPL, you get 5-year rights. But for other sports, it's a task going out every time to pitch your product over and over again, and they go back to the performance of the previous season to do their post-evals and therefore negotiate the next deal. So what is very, very important is to make sure that sports other than cricket do well in India. And a lot of work needs to be done at the grassroots level, as I was saying earlier, to make these sports popular in India. Till that time, I think it's important that we keep the cost structures balanced. We do not go overboard on rights fee as well as on the cost that we incur on production of an event or a studio show, because it's a vicious cycle. Yeah, if you many years ago somebody said that sports networks can't be profitable, and I disagree. Sports networks have been profitable and will be profitable in India as well. It's an investment phase that just got over. Now going forward, the acquisition of every property will be thoroughly evaluated from a longer-term business perspective as well as economic perspective before we put in a bid for that opportunity. And as in the recent past, we've demonstrated we are willing to let go if it does not make sense.
So you talked about acquisition, use that word, but I think if you look at football, kabaddi, they haven't been acquired as much as partnered in that sense, right? The broadcast taking a principal position. Is that what's necessary for the let's call them the tertiary sports? Because like you said, otherwise you're going back to the well every year. One year the broadcaster might give a little money or production, the next year the promoters are going back, talking to another broadcaster. So it's hard to build a league on a feet of clay. So do you think for the secondary sports it needs more of that partnership and principal position for them to sustain? Because the broadcasters, including yourselves, are not willing to write big checks for non-cricket sports.
Yeah. Yes and no. Yes, because it gives a sustained source of central revenues, if I may use the phrase, to the league. And therefore, it starts off strong, because if there is a strong broadcaster backing it, then the franchisees will be attracted to the league and they will come in and be part of it. Long term, though, it'll become a limiting factor.
Yes, because there's no competitive market.
There's no competition, and therefore the broadcasters will not have the motivation to increase the central revenues, and therefore the franchises will not get adequate increases year on year, and it's again a spiral that you get into. So you have to be careful with a new sport that you're taking out into the market for the first time. Maybe it's a good way to start. Okay, but then you have to do it for a finite period of time, knowing fully well that it will not last forever if it goes on like that. And there are examples of that too in the market. And keep it for a finite period and then open it to the market for it to get its true value.
It's a hard position for someone to take though once they've invested, right? So it's a hard position for someone.
It sure is. And it's never easy having invested heavily in a particular property to put it out in the market. But you have to be, if you really want your investment to grow and prosper into the future, it's important that you open it to the market. Otherwise, you'll never be able to discover the right value for your rights.
Let's sort of digress a little now to OTT. Sony Live, the whole OTT space in India. If you look at the breakdown of the IPL rights, the digital side was attributed phenomenal percentages. You guys have been doing great with Sony Live, and other platforms are developing well. What's going on there, and what do you see? What is the impact of that on the next cycle of rights, you think?
As far as the IPL bidding is concerned, I know it keeps coming back, but it was not just the OTT players. It was also the social media platforms and telcos that were very, very active in that process. But coming back to OTT, we have seen a huge growth of a consumption of video on digital in India over the last 18 months or so. And the reason for that is the 4G services being available in India, and one of the telcos being extremely aggressive in marketing their product, taking it closer to the customer, and giving them access to cheap access to video content. And we've seen a huge surge in growth of video consumption on mobiles, because India, as you know, internet is on mobile, and that has not necessarily translated into ad dollars
yet,
but it will catch up sometime into the future. Along with that, live sports has become a reality on OTT platforms. All big events are available live on the OTT platforms in India with the broadcasters. We have made big investments ourselves into bringing live sports on Sony Live. So we had La Liga there. We recently had the India-Sri Lanka cricket series there. The Under-17 World Cup, which is starting in a month's time in India, will be available live on Sony Live, and likewise South Africa, India-South Africa series as well. Youth is consuming a lot of sport on digital platforms, and therefore it is very important for us to make sure that they get what they want to see when they want to see on their mobile phones, which is why it's important for us to go out and acquire these rights. What we've also seen, and there's been a debate in the market about digital cannibalizing broadcast viewership. What we have seen is quite the contrary. We've seen growth of consumption of live sports on digital, and alongside we've seen a huge growth in reach on television as well. So the two complement each other rather than cannibalize each other. Anybody who's watching live sports on a small screen is doing it because he or she does not have at that time access to a large screen. As soon as you get in front of a big screen, you want to see your favorite sport on the big screen with your family or friends in a more social kind of setup, rather than watching it solo on a small screen. So OTT and digital at large is growing very rapidly in India, and you will see more investments being made on content on OTT.
And probably going back to our tertiary sport conversation, maybe a key factor in making some of these leagues being sustainable, whether it be the rural audience or maybe leagues that are focused on youth, because you'll need that additional platform in order to make it commercially viable.
Yes, but as I said, at this stage, the dollars are not keeping pace with the views. Sometime in the future, they will, and it's a new opportunity that has opened up with access becoming easier, data costs coming down. People are consuming more content on mobile through 4G, which gives us an opportunity to actually experiment more and take some of these new sports, new from a viewership perspective out there through the digital platforms.
You've mentioned NBA, WWE, which is doing phenomenally well. I believe the WWE at 5:30 in the morning outrates India-Sri Lanka cricket, which I found phenomenal. And it's maybe a comment on society at some level. But what are these international bodies, whether they be federations or things like WWE or even clubs? There's a lot of representatives of various sporting clubs here who are trying to make inroads to India. How can they make partnerships with organisations like yours to further their goals?
I think most important is to show seriousness to the market. And some of the names that you've taken, whether it's NBA or La Liga or WWE, actually have set up offices in India. And they are working at the grassroots level to take their sport closer to the youth, and working with the broadcaster as well in making sure that the interests of the two are aligned, and we work with them to achieve the common objective of making the sport popular in India.
So last one, I know we're just over time, but I think it's important because India has had an up and down image globally, especially in the context of sport. Commonwealth Games didn't do India any favours in terms of image, etc. But my view always has been that there is money to be made, short, medium and long term, but like you said, it requires a demonstration of seriousness, and I think it does require partnerships and a commitment on the ground, either directly or indirectly. But so what message would you give to people in the room about India that I think there's a lot of talk about China, but I think based on the activity that's happened in the last 10 years, I certainly believe there's opportunity across the board. And what sort of message at a business level would you give to people looking to come into India?
Yeah, India, as I was saying earlier, is a very young country. 65% of India is below the age of 35. It is the fastest growing economy globally. It has the most stable government for the last 3 years, and a lot of new initiatives are being taken by the government to make India the place to be to do business in. So there are a lot of positives around India today. There are serious players like us and some of our competitors who are making significant investments in our respective businesses, in growing not just organically but inorganically. That shows the intent of key players like us in the market, and should give a lot of confidence to others to come and work in India, partner with people like us in India, invest not just money but resources, human resources in India, because it's a great opportunity which is here for now, will be here for a few more years, but may not be here for a very, very long time.
Listen, I wanted to thank you personally for coming today on behalf of Sports Matters and on behalf of everyone in the room. I mean, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for close to 20 years, and you're a true gentleman and have made a great contribution, not just to the sports landscape, but the entire broadcast and media landscape. So it was a real privilege for me, and I think for everyone to have heard from you today. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honor is mine. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and interact with the smart people here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, MP.